Hey everyone, this is the rewriter writing in. For today's video, I wanted to rewrite the story of Star Wars Battlefront 2, the EA edition from 2017. I thought that this story had a lot of potential, with the main character being on the Imperial side, but unfortunately it went down a very predictable path that made it feel kinda cliche and generic. As well, the story felt very short and a little underbaked, as the clear focus of this game was the multiplayer. And I know usually these games deal with the multiplayer as the forefront, but it would have been nice to see a story with a little bit more character and a little bit less cliches. So with this all being said, let's dive into the rewritten story of Star Wars Battlefront 2. The game begins with a pan of the dark, rain-swept entertainment district of Nar Shaddaa in the dead of night, with only the neon signs of the buildings providing a cascade of light that reflected off the slick streets. A man in a flashy white suit is seen running for his life out of a casino. His bodyguards run up to him, asking what they should do, but the man shoves them out of the way, yelling for them to do their jobs. The bodyguards stand there confused and pull out their blaster pistols. However, before they could move another inch, they were pulled into the shadows. The man continued to sprint, looking behind him to where the guards had been, but were now gone. As soon as the man ran behind the casino and into the dark alleyway, he darted away, but hit something and fell down. Out of the shadows appeared a figure, moving closer towards him. His flashy suit had gotten muddy, and he began to plead that whatever he was getting paid, he would triple it. But only silence came as the figure moved closer to him. The man began attempting to crawl away, but a blaster shot came from behind that hit only a couple inches ahead of him. The man cried, saying that he didn't have to do this, and that they could make a deal. Before he could utter another word, a black glove grabbed his leg as he began screaming and dragged him into the darkness. Back at a dingy-looking bar that had been turned into a hub of assassins and bounty hunters, a large basilisk man named Sid was sitting in a booth. He was drinking blue milk that had definitely been spiked with something, and had many bounty pucks and tracking fobs on the table in front of him. Out of nowhere, a body bag had been thrown down in front of him, with the target's bloody bounty puck being thrown onto the table. The basilisk man laughed, telling the assassin well done, and that if they were to take down another high-profile target, they would get the legendary Grief Karga's attention. After he transferred the credits over to the assassin and ordered a couple of thugs to take the body out, he remarked that the assassin was making him lots of credits and that he was pleased. Without a word, the assassin faded into the darkness and went back to their hideout, a room on top of a massive skyscraper that overlooked the whole city. Once back in their room, the assassin walked past a board of targets that had been marked on the hollow wall, with news clippings saying that a mysterious phantom was stalking the planet of Nar Shaddaa. The assassin pulls back their cloth hood, as it is revealed that Iden Versio is the phantom. Iden looks out to the stormy skies as she remembers the fall of the Empire. The screen fades to white as the text on screen reads, 5 years earlier. Iden Versio is a member of Inferno Squad, an elite squadron made up of 3 highly trained stormtroopers who took on vital missions for the Empire. Her other teammates, Del Meeko and Gideon Hask, were troopers that she had fought alongside for many years. However, even though she had had more experience in combat training than either of them, she was passed up for the promotion to be the leader of Inferno Squad, and the title had been given to Hask. After she tried to plead her case, she was given the poor explanation that she didn't have the proper skill set to be a leader, and that someone like Hask was more appropriate for the position. She knew this explanation was garbage, and knew that she had been passed up because she was a woman, and the Empire favored strong men to lead, like the Emperor or Darth Vader. Her anger continued to reside in her, but she still followed orders as she was a soldier. Her final mission, unbeknownst to her, was to protect the shield generator for the Death Star that was located on the moon of Endor. This was due to a large-scale attack that the rebellion had enacted, and this shield generator was vital to the life of the Death Star. Once Inferno Squad deployed on Endor, they were greeted by a whole host of rebels and Ewoks alike. Gideon and Iden drove a path down the middle, blasting rebels left and right, while also punting Ewoks that attempted to throw pathetic rocks at them. Del was perched atop a platform among the trees, sniping rebels that attempted to flank them. Iden threw a grenade into the crowd of rebels around the door that led to the shield generator, but the overwhelming force of them was too great for the three of them to handle. Gideon ordered Del to retreat back to the staging area where an ATST was located and use it to destroy the crowd of rebels. Del ran back to the ATST while Iden and Gideon were holding them off, but only barely. Once Del returned with the ATST, he started to rain heavy blaster fire on them, and it was pushing them back. With a smile, Iden thought that they had successfully pushed back the rebels, and that there was no hope of them ever getting to the shield generator. However, two Ewoks climbed up the sides of trees parallel to the ATST, and chopped at two ropes that were holding two giant tree trunks. Iden and Gideon tried to scream for Del to get out of there, but the trees flew into the sides of the ATST and smashed it, blowing it up. Iden was distraught, and almost stopped fighting completely, but Gideon told her that they still needed to finish the mission. However, the rebels had breached the doors of the shield generator while they were distracted, and they rushed back to defend it. Iden and Gideon began bombarding the compound with impact grenades to stop the overwhelming force. However, they had to retreat back to another position in one last desperate attempt to flush the rebels out. As they were running back into position, a sniper blast rung out, which went right through Gideon's chest. Iden screamed, dragging Gideon behind a fallen tree trunk and trying to prop up his head. Gideon saw the fear in Iden's eyes and told her that she needed to escape, as things were going south real quick, and she wouldn't survive the onslaught. Before Gideon closed his eyes for the last time, he told Iden that she deserved to be the leader of this squad, and not him. He slumped down, dying in Iden's arms. Tears started to form on Iden's face, but before she could try to make her escape, she felt the planet rumbling, and looked up to see the Death Star explode. Iden knew that the Empire had been truly defeated, and that she wouldn't make it out of Endor alive if she delayed any longer. Iden snuck her way through a compound full of rebels who were taking stormtrooper prisoners. As much as she wanted to free them, it was too risky, and knew that she just had to get out of there as quickly as she could. After stealthily taking down a couple of rebels who were guarding a TIE fighter, she hopped into the cockpit and took off, going to the wreckage of the Death Star. She flew through all the rubble and debris that was supposed to be the force of the Empire, but was now just a floating burial ground. Iden thought within herself that even though she knew good people who were in the Empire High Command treated her as disposable and didn't account for her skill in combat and leadership. She felt torn, as on the one hand, the Empire was all she had ever known, but on the other hand, she hated how she was treated and was glad that the Empire was finished. However, she now realized that her whole life had changed, and that she needed to put the Empire behind her if she was going to survive. Iden then saw a squadron of X-Wings approaching and made a jump to light speed, with the screen becoming white as the TIE blasted off. Back in the present, Iden steps away from the rain-soaked window that she had reminisced by. She walked to her holotable that had a list of her previous targets, as well as some new ones. She began looking through some files when a holodisc projected a hologram of Sid, who explained to her that he had another bounty for her if she was willing. It was high-paying, but also dangerous, as one of his other bounty hunters had already been killed. Iden then asked who the target was. He told her that it was a fighting pit boss who had been kidnapping people and making them fight to the death against monsters and other fighters alike. Iden then asked how much, to which he replied that it was 500,000 credits for her dead, 700,000 for her alive. Iden, without hesitation, replied that she would take it. Sid smiled, saying that it was a deal, and that she needed to meet him tomorrow night. The projection turned off, and Iden slumped into her bed, and was out cold for the next several hours. The following evening, she met with Sid, who gave her the bounty puck and tracking fob for the target's location. With a nod, Iden took the supplies and went off to her mission, which took her south of Sid's diner to a stadium that was filled to the brim with low-life scum and villainy. Iden's target was the pit boss, a Saren woman with an army of thugs at her disposal. Iden knew that she needed to bring her in alive, as this was the greater payout, but also knew that this was going to be tricky. She used her black robes to blend into the crowds of people who were watching a death match between a Wookiee and a giant spider native to Kashyyyk. The robes were also able to conceal her E11 blaster rifle, but not very well, and it was cumbersome for her to hide it. Iden made her way to where the pit boss was, which was in a special box that had blaster-proof glass, a microphone, and a full bar with drinks from all over the galaxy. Before Iden could reach her, though, she was stopped by 2 guards who told her to turn around or there would be trouble. Iden then explained to them that she had been asked by the pit boss to accompany her, to which they laughed and grabbed her to throw her out, but she twisted the one guard's arm and kicked the other in the jaw, but not before she had been sliced in the arm with a knife. She leapt into the room to grab the pit boss, but she wasn't there, and Iden was then shot with a stun blast that put her on the ground. One guard came and grabbed the E11 blaster from her back holster, and remarked that he hadn't seen one of these things in years. The pit boss then bent over to see who had tried to kill her, and laughed, stating that she would be good as a contestant in her arena. Then 2 guards grabbed her, and led her down to the entrance of the arena, and threw her next to the bones of the Wookiee who had fought the spider, but obviously failed in defeating it. Next to the bones was a thick cortosis blade. Then, over the loudspeaker, the pit boss shouted that a new contestant had joined the arena, and asked the crowd if she looked tough enough to handle the spider, to which the crowd booed and threw food at Iden. Iden knew that she had to be patient and wait for the right timing to strike the boss. After the boss stopped talking, the spider burst out of the gate and charged at Iden. She quickly grabbed the blade from off the ground and rolled out of the way of the charging spider. Once the spider turned around, it attempted to bite Iden, but she slid under the spider, cutting off one of its legs. The spider reeled back and shot webs at Iden, but she was able to cut them in pieces in midair. The crowd's booing turned into cheers as she was taking down the spider. The spider then jumped at Iden, but 2 of its legs came from behind her and stabbed her in the back. Iden screamed and fell to the ground. The spider then began to try and web her up and eat her, but Iden lifted her arm out of the web and stabbed the spider in the mouth, causing it to topple onto its back. Iden then cut the webbing from off her legs and jumped onto the spider, stabbing it right in the stomach. The creature collapsed and the crowd was roaring. The pit boss laughed, saying that this contestant had spirit, but then asked the crowd if she should have her spirit broken, to which the crowd cheered. Immediately, a large group of thugs carrying blasters and blades came out of the gate and started firing on her. Iden pulled the blade from the spider's stomach and jumped, dodging the blaster fire. She then rolled towards the thugs with blasters and cut their legs, making them drop to the ground in agony. 3 of the blade-wielding thugs charged at her, and she was able to parry and counter them. Another blaster-wielding thug attempted to sneak up behind her and blast her, but she was too quick, and grabbed the blaster out of his hand, shooting him in the throat. She then jumped into the crowds and went for the pit boss. Thugs began rushing her. She had a blaster in one hand and shot blaster rounds into the 3 thugs, and with the other hand sliced up the thugs who got close to her with the cortosis blade. The crowd began running out of the stadium, and in the commotion, Iden was able to reach the pit boss, who had a strange object in her hand. The boss then flipped a switch on the curved metal hilt, and it ignited in an energy whip. Iden had never seen such a thing before, and wasn't too sure how to deflect against it. The boss then cracked the whip towards Iden, which grabbed her cortosis blade and flung it out of her hand. Iden attempted to run up and disarm the whip from the boss, but she roped Iden's legs and began dragging Iden towards her. Iden then grabbed the blade lying on the ground and sliced the rope with it, and was able to sever it. She grabbed the cut energy rope and used it to wrap around the boss's neck, while also putting a blaster shot in her leg. The boss was writhing on the ground, and Iden was able to use the rope to hog-tie the boss, picked up the 2 cortosis blades to use in her inventory, and dragged her back to the secret shuttle that transported her back to Sid's diner. Iden then dumped the roped-up boss at Sid's feet, to which he then ordered the thugs to bring her to the back for drop-off to the client that requested her. Sid then transferred the funds to Iden, and she left back to her hideout to await her next target. Sid came onto the holodisc a few hours later, stating that he had big news for her. He explained that her recent successes in capturing and eliminating high-value targets has caught the attention of Grief Karga Navarro, who has attempted to see the Phantom for assignments that he felt could use her attention. Sid also remarked that she was really making a name for herself. She replied with a simple but sincere, "Thanks, Sid," and asked when to go see him. Sid replied that it was probably in her best interest to get a move on as soon as she could. However, she was going to need a ship to get into Navarro, and he told her to get one from the black market in the industrial district. Iden turned off the holodisc and smiled, as she was now truly becoming something to fear in the galaxy. She packed her gear and left her apartment, not to return again for a very long time. She listened to Sid's instructions and went back to the black market, going to a ship vendor who was selling exotic and highly sought-after ships. The durian vendor asked her what she was looking for, to which she replied that she needed something quick, light, and stealthy. The durian rubbed his cheek for a moment, then told her that he had something special, but it was going to cost her quite a few credits. She then demanded to see the ship. The durian took her to the shipping dock and pulled a tarp off a small cruiser. The durian then went on to explain that this cruiser was no ordinary ship, and that it was extremely rare and valuable. It was a Jedi starfighter that was used during the Clone Wars, with a black and red paint job that covered the Jedi symbol, as he didn't want to attract the wrong kind of attention. Its speed is unmatched, and it has a feature that makes it virtually undetectable. She then asked how much, to which he replied that it would cost her about 400,000 credits. She transferred the credits to him, and took the starfighter to orbit, setting the coordinates in its databank for Navarro, and took off at light speed, which causes the screen to go white again. Another flashback occurs, this one taking place after she had flown to the wreckage of the Death Star, and was now in light speed travel. She didn't know where to go, as she was now on the run. She began to think about what she could do with the skill set that she had. She had to do something combative, as this is all that she had ever known, and all that she had ever trained for, and she was not about to give that up over the Empire being taken down. She thought about security of some kind, but then was disgusted over the idea, as she was not going to be told what to do or be judged by anyone. She then thought about bounty hunting, as she had the combat skills necessary, and this could make her money, letting her work on her own time and would allow her to become feared above anyone, not being ordered and told what she could and couldn't be. She was set on bounty hunting for her path, but was struggling as to where to go. She thought about heading to Jabba's palace on Tatooine, as Jabba had many connections and could probably get her some jobs, but then remembered that the Jedi Luke Skywalker had killed him, and she was not about to get involved there. She then remembered that the Empire hired many bounty hunters from the planet Nar Shaddaa, and was untouched by the war. She then set the coordinates for Nar Shaddaa to begin her new life. Once she arrived at Nar Shaddaa, she didn't know where to begin. Her helmet had a databank stored in its electronic files, and she hooked it up to the hardware in her TIE fighter and searched the database for the possible recruiter. She had to be careful, as she was using encrypted Imperial files that the Rebellion now had access to, so she needed to find the information fast, or her location could be tracked. She then found a few low-level bounty pushers that would possibly get her a job, and knew that she needed to get rid of this TIE fighter, as it would bring a lot of unwanted attention. She then took off her helmet and armor pieces, as stormtroopers were now wanted criminals, and put them on the seat of the TIE. She hopped out, sticking an explosive on it, and running as she hit the detonator. Her old life was gone, and now she was fully committed to the life of a bounty hunter. The first thing that she needed was a new outfit to create her assassin persona. She went to a street vendor and purchased a long black cloak that would conceal her weapons and hide her face, as she wasn't going to be treated unfairly again for who she was. With only a few credits left, she stumbled upon a shady-looking merchant who was selling some unique items, one of which was a voice changer half mask that would cover her mouth, allowing her to be unrecognizable. She used the last of her credits on this purchase, and her new life began. She put on her voice changer and threw her hood over her head, only exposing the mask underneath. She then came into the place from her database that was a sighted bounty hunter den, known as Sid's Diner. A massive basilisk was speaking to a couple other thugs, handing them some sort of puck, but she didn't understand what it was. After the two thugs left, with her robotic voice, she demanded that he give her a contract, to which he laughed, telling her that whoever they obviously didn't understand how this all worked. He then asked her who she was, and she had to think for a second. Her long black robe made her think of a jet black cruiser that she used to pilot back in her early years of Imperial training, which was called the Phantom. She replied back that he could address her as the Phantom, and he replied beginning with an "Okay, Phantom," and continuing that she needed to earn the respect of the guild first before getting contracts. She then asked how that would be possible. All he replied with was that they needed to impress him by performing a feat that confirms to him that he could trust them to carry out dangerous missions without getting caught and exposing the guild. She turned around, angry and confused, and went out of the diner. What am I supposed to do with this useless information? Iden thought to herself. She then snuck around the back and found a couple of thugs huddled together, and she began to eavesdrop. One of them, a taller but slim Marillion woman, was telling them that she was going on a mission to take down some corrupt politician on the northeast side of the Foundation District. Iden knew that she could tail her to see how a mission was done, and hopefully get an idea of how to impress this guild boss. Iden continued to tail her as she stalked the rooftops, watching the woman as she began her mission. After a few minutes of tailing her, the woman approached a massive white house, and put her blaster pistol in what looked like a carrying case for it that was disguised as a purse of some kind. She knocked on the door, and then a man standing in a robe with a smile on his face opened it and invited her in. She was standing, walking, and talking differently, as if she were an altogether different person. Iden took note of that and continued to creep up to the roof that had a glass window where she could see the living room. The man poured out a drink and went to sit on the couch, but when he had turned around and sat down, she had a blaster pointed at his head. The man looked calm, though, almost like he was expecting this, and immediately 2 armed thugs burst into the room with their blasters pointed at her. Iden was nervous, but knew that this could be her opportunity to impress that basilisk at the diner. She pulled out her E11 blaster from her back holster and shot at the thugs from the roof window, shattering the glass and dropping down in front of the man. He pulled out a vibro dagger and attempted to shank her with it, but she grabbed his arm and broke it. He dropped the knife, but before it could hit the ground, she kicked it up to her hand and stabbed him in the head. She turned around to see the woman on the ground and reached out her hand to pick her up. Once they got back to the diner, the woman explained that this dark figure saved her from getting killed, but still demanded that she receive the full cut. The basilisk then told her to get out and never return, as she had failed him. The woman stormed out in anger, and Iden walked past her and up to the man. Her robotic voice cracked out a, "Are you impressed yet?" He replied that the woman they saved was not any sort of top-tier bounty hunter, but that she was rising up in the ranks. However, her spot was now vacant and needs to be filled. He then offered her a membership into the guild, and stated with a laugh that he knows they are going to make him a lot of credits. The deal was struck with a handshake. The camera then closes in on her hand, and then zooms out from her hand to reveal her glove pulling back the throttle of her ship in the present day. Her computer on the starfighter indicated to her that they were approaching Navarro. She knew that her legacy was growing. However, she didn't want to be just known as any other bounty hunter. She wanted to be the most feared and dangerous one of them all. As the cruiser touched down on the hangar bay, Iden saw a bustling little town with many different creatures and vendors scattered all over. It reminded her of Nar Shaddaa in a way, but without the massive skyscrapers and flying cars shining their neon glare. This place felt more real and grounded than Nar Shaddaa, and she actually appreciated that fact. However, she wasn't here to look at the scenery. She had a mission. She walked down the path with the crowd of vendors toward a large cantina. She then walked in, and everyone stared at her for a moment like she was fresh meat, but then turned back around and continued whatever they were doing. She then noticed a man surrounded by thugs and having multiple bounty pucks on the table. Grief Karga waved his arm at her to come over to him. She walked up to him, with Grief stating that he had been anticipating the Phantom's arrival, and that he had big plans for them. However, before he could continue, she demanded for him to give her the biggest, most dangerous bounty that he had. Grief smiled and laughed, saying that he admired her tenacity, but she had a lot to learn first. Iden wasn't taking it, saying that she had learned enough from 5 years of bounty hunting and never losing a target, and now she wanted the most dangerous bounty he had. Grief became angry, saying that they had no right to demand from him because without him, they would be nowhere. However, she countered, saying that with elite bounty hunters like herself, he would have no status. Grief sat back, admiring their resolve, and gave in, telling her about some extreme bounties, knowing that they probably would die anyway. After he told her about a couple of large bounties, she scoffed, asking if this was really all that he had, to which he replied that he had another one, but it was way too much for her to handle. The Phantom then demanded to know who it was. Grief explained that there was a bounty that had been racking up for nearly 10 years, and that it was getting higher every year. The bounty was the legendary smuggler Han Solo, and the reward was 50 million credits for his death, as he was too dangerous and elusive to be kept alive. However, there would be no payment up front, as everyone who has attempted this has failed, and the credits are only given out to the one who completes the contract in full. He then stated that over the years, hundreds of bounty hunters attempted to kill him, and all have failed. Even the legendary Boba Fett was unable to kill him. There was no way she would survive this mission. And what if I do? Her robotic voice cracked. Grief then said that she would be truly a legend, and that she would be the most sought-after bounty hunter in the galaxy. She then stated that she would take the job, but Grief refused, saying that she was just going to get herself killed. She persistently demanded the job, until Grief finally gave it to her, but told her she wasn't going to make it out alive. The Phantom replied that she was going to take her chances. Grief then briefed her on the mission. Han Solo is the spouse of Queen Leia Organa of Naboo, and that he was now with her in the palace. He continued to explain that this might actually be one of the better times to strike, as he is at his most vulnerable because of the loss of his companion and fellow smuggler, Chewbacca. He will be in this palace, and it will be there that the Phantom would be tasked in eliminating him. However, he stated that this palace was no casino or skyscraper that they could easily infiltrate, but that it was a heavily secured fortress that is essentially impregnable. As well, there were rumors that Jedi might be there to serve as extra protection for the Queen and Solo. However, there was also a bit of a lesser security presence as the Queen was off on political business, and a large security detail went with her. If the Phantom were to do this task, they would need the proper equipment, as the get-up the Phantom was in would get them nowhere. Grief then told the Phantom to visit his armorer, as he had had some equipment for them. Grief then reluctantly handed the bounty puck and tracking fob to the Phantom, and she left to see the armorer. The Phantom went around the back of the cantina to the armory, which had hundreds of weapons lining the walls, and armor plating was displayed on the countertop. A Weequay man stood behind the counter and asked what he could do for them. The Phantom replied that Grief had told her to come because he had some equipment for her. The man then clapped his hands, saying that he was expecting them, and that he certainly had some things for the Phantom. The man then asked the Phantom to come to the back of the shop, as he had something unique back there. When they went back, Iden saw a jet black armor set. The man then explained that when Grief told him that the Phantom was coming to meet with him, he began brainstorming about an armor set that would act as a camouflage for the night, while also being terrifying for the target, to evoke that ghostly aspect of the Phantom. He then stated that this armor was Cortosis plate armor. It was lightweight but extremely durable, and was also known for being able to withstand lightsabers. The gauntlets were also Cortosis, and had a set of blades installed in them for extra weaponry, as well as the capability to hang on walls. The belt had sheaths for blades, as well as a back holster for the blaster pistol, and smoke cartridges for quick getaways. He then noticed the Cortosis blades hanging from her belt, and claimed that this armor would go very well with those. He then showed her the helmet, a silver helm with red slits for eyes. It was also outfitted with a voice changer, underwater breather, night vision, optical zooming, and a built-in apparatus that acted as a gas mask. The boots had a chip installed in them that allowed for the footsteps to be completely silent. Next was the cloak and hood, which were also lightweight and had an installation that allowed for them to shroud the wearer in a camouflage of the environment, allowing them to seamlessly blend in. Finally, the weapon, which was a modified DX-13 dual-trigger blaster pistol that allowed for single or rapid fire. It was also equipped with a custom silencer modification that, when activated, would make the blast from the weapon completely silent. This whole setup could be hers, for a price, the Weequay concluded. The Phantom then asked how much, to which he replied that it would cost 1,000,000 credits. She didn't have that, so she proposed a trade. This armor set and weapon for one lightsaber. The Weequay was stunned, asking how Phantom had acquired one. The Phantom then replied that they didn't have it with them, but the mission that they were going on would involve Jedi. The man was hesitant at first, but trusted in the Phantom to perform their end of the bargain. Iden then took the suit and weapons and went over to the motel that was there, as she would head out the next day. The following day, Iden took her armor and supplies out of the protective casing and began putting it on. Iden began to disappear, with the Phantom taking over. Once she had put the whole suit on, Iden was gone, and only a shadow remained. She slid her 2 Cortosis blades into their sheaths, and put her blaster pistol into the back holster. She felt nervous, as this job was deemed impossible from the years of failed attempts. However, she could not fail, as this is what the past 5 years have all been leading up to. She wasn't going to let this slip from her grasp, like so many things from the Imperial days. She was going to prove that she was the best and capable of handling anything. With all her gear on her, she plugged in the coordinates for Naboo and launched off. By the time she had arrived on Naboo, it was in the middle of the night, so she shut off the starfighter's lights and hovered behind the palace. She knew that she couldn't just walk into the front door, as this was the most secured fortress on Naboo. By downloading the palace schematics, she found that there was a vent underneath the palace fountain that led out to the ocean below, and knew that this would be her best alternative. She activated the underwater breather and ejected down out of the starfighter, dropping into the water below. There were searchlights all along the walls, and Iden had to avoid them so as not to be detected. Once she had swam through the sewer vent and gotten up to the palace fountain vent, a guard was near the fountain and could hear a rumbling coming from it. The guard walked over to the fountain, looking into the water and seeing nothing. Once he turned around, Iden unwrapped the cloak around her, deactivating the camouflage, and covered the guard's mouth before plunging the blade through him and throwing him into the fountain. She then pulled up a hollow image of the schematics on her wrist and saw that she was on level 1, but the throne room where Han was on level 4. Iden could hear a couple of guards heading towards her, so she jumped up onto the wall and began climbing using her gauntlets. This got her to the 2nd floor, where Iden noticed that this floor was patrolled by Senate guards with electro staves. She jumped off the wall, landing her blade into a guard's head. Another guard witnessed this, but before they could speak or sound the alarm, Iden blasted them with her silenced DX-13. The guard dropped dead, but the 3 other guards noticed the red flare and went to check it out. Iden was of course gone, but the guards saw the bodies. One of them was heading for the alarm, but when they approached it, it had been slashed through, so they were on their own. They huddled together, thinking that there was no way they could be snuck up on if they were all looking in all directions. However, they failed to look up, as Iden was dangling above them. Iden dropped a smoke pellet in the middle of the group and dropped down. All the guards could see were 2 red slits. Iden used her blades on her gauntlets to quickly dispatch the group. She then took the elevator and was listening to the palace comms that she had hacked into, hearing that they were somewhat aware of her presence, though not fully, as those on the upper levels had been trying to reach out to those on the lower floors, but had not been successful. She also heard that extra security would be going to the elevators. She knew this would happen, of course, as it would serve as a quicker way to dispatch a group of guards. Once the elevator arrived at the 3rd level, a group of guards were there with their blasters pointed, just like she knew they would. When the door opened, they began firing, but nobody was in it. Confused, they went inside the elevator to take a look, but were overcome with a gas pellet that Iden had placed on the ground, and were all suffocating inside the elevator. Iden hopped out of the vent above the elevator and shut the door, leaving them all in there. The commotion of the blaster fire alerted a number of other guards to her. Iden then used the schematic to find the power source of the palace, which just so happened to be on this floor. She spotted the box on the left wall just behind one of the pillars. With a well-placed shot, she fried the switch, and the power shut off immediately. The guards turned on their flashlights, and Iden activated her night vision. One by one, she was picking off targets until one remained. His blaster was shaking, with the flashlight shaking as well. From the shadows, Iden's robotic voice rang out, asking him if he was afraid. The guard yelled, asking who this was. Iden was behind him, telling him that it was his phantom, before sticking the cortosis blade through his chest. With the whole palace being darkened, this only made Iden's job easier, as now it would be even harder to see her. According to her schematics, she was directly below the throne room. She then climbed through a vent on the wall that led right above Han's bed. She opened it slowly to ensure that she would not be heard, and dropped a couple feet from the bed. A body was definitely inside, as the sheets had a large hump where Han was. She then slowly pulled out her blade and pulled back the sheets, revealing nothing. Immediately, 2 lightsabers ignited, and she turned around to see 2 Jedi, one with a green lightsaber and the other with a blue one. The Jedi with the green lightsaber ordered her to drop her weapon and come with them. She did what he said, dropping her weapon and turning around. However, she quickly slammed a smoke pellet on the ground, grabbing her weapon. One of them force-pushed away the smoke, but she was already gone. She was hanging from the wall, and jumped down to plunge her blade in one of them, but he was too quick, and deflected her blade with his lightsaber before force-pushing her into the wall. This was going to be a tougher fight than she had anticipated. She pulled out her blaster and began rapid firing at the green lightsaber, but they were all deflected. One of the Jedi lunged toward her to close the gap. She pulled out her second cortosis blade and began dueling with the blue lightsaber Jedi. He was quick, but his technique was a bit sloppy. She was able to counter one of his attacks by ducking and then cutting off his lightsaber-holding hand, sending it flying into the air. All in a matter of milliseconds, she sheathed one of her blades and caught the lightsaber in her other hand, now dual-wielding a lightsaber and a cortosis blade. As the other Jedi collapsed, the one with the green lightsaber stood their ground, waiting for Iden to strike them. And she did, flying at him with speed he hadn't seen from a combatant in years. They began dueling, with sparks flying from the lightsaber clashes, which were enough to brighten the dark room. This Jedi was much more skilled, and was able to slice at Iden's chest. Her armor was protective enough that it didn't slice her in half, but she still felt the pain. However, she wasn't going to let that stop her. She kept slashing at him, but he was too quick, and disarmed her of her lightsaber. It fell to the ground and rolled away, with each combatant now only having one weapon. However, he had the advantage over her, and he was able to use the force to pick her up in the air and throw his lightsaber into her chest. She screamed, dropping her weapons and eventually being thrown to the ground. Iden was outmatched, but she had one more trick up her sleeve. When the Jedi walked over to her, she lied there still for a moment, as though she had died. He flipped her over and she quickly popped the blades out from one of her gauntlets and stuck it in his head. He dropped to the ground and the other Jedi screamed as he force-pulled Iden to him with his other hand. She flew towards him, grabbing him in the face and breaking his neck. They both fell to the ground. With Iden almost not being able to move, she was in so much pain. All of a sudden, her right gauntlet began to flash with a blue light, and a stim popped out. She then injected it into her chest, and could feel it starting to heal the wound almost instantly. Then a door flew open, and it was Han Solo. He had opened the emergency door as he had heard nothing else, and assumed that the assassin had been killed. He looked around the room, only seeing the dead Jedi, and attempted to get back in the room, but the Phantom was right behind him. He tried to pull up his DL-44, but she smacked it out of his hand. He tried to punch the Phantom, but she grabbed his hand and broke it. Then, with her robotic voice, the Phantom told Han that his angel of death awaited him. She pulled out the cortosis blade and cut off Han's head. With a thud, his body landed on the ground, as she had just killed the most sought-after smuggler in the galaxy. She limped over to the lightsabers on the ground and picked them up, while also grabbing Han's DL-44 and his head. She wrapped his head in a bag and clicked a button on her gauntlet that summoned her starfighter to her. It flew through the window, smashing it, and she leapt into the cockpit with her prizes and left Naboo. When she had arrived on Navarro, she slammed the cantina door open, and everyone stopped talking and just stared at her. She limped over to Greef, who was absolutely astonished. She pulled out a bag from behind her, and when he looked inside, he threw up. She then put his blaster on the table, along with the 2 lightsabers that she had collected. Greef then remarked that the rumors were true, and that Jedi were truly there. She then demanded the money, saying that she wanted double since 2 Jedi were there. Greef obliged, still dumbfounded that she had pulled this off. After the credits were transferred, she told him to give her only the best contracts, and that she would only be a myth to the rest of the criminal underworld, something to be feared. She didn't want to be contracted by low-level scum, but only by the top who could afford her. Greef agreed, and she left the cantina. Iden had done it. She had become the most feared bounty hunter in the galaxy, and got into her starfighter, waiting for the next contract. And that's the end of my story. I hope you guys enjoyed. Thank you so much for watching. And I know that this one was a little bit of a long one, actually one of my longest ones ever, but I just got a little bit carried away because I really enjoyed this story. So let me know what you thought about it down in the comments below. And I've really been loving working on these Star Wars videos, so if you enjoy them, feel free to leave a like. And if you enjoy this type of content and want to see more, then subscribe to the channel where I will be covering all kinds of stories. Thanks again, and this is the Rewriter writing out.